The storm came without warning. Sheets of rain battered the quiet suburban streets of Millstone, rattling windows and sending leaves skittering across the pavement. Inside his modest two-story home, Ethan Cross moved with practiced calm, straightening glasses on the shelf and adjusting the photographs on the mantel. He seemed every bit the perfect neighbor, clean-cut, affable, and unnervingly polite. But beneath that surface lay a man who had spent years living in shadows, studying escape routes and perfecting a plan no one could imagine. That night, Ethan's small gathering of friends and neighbors had begun like any other. Glasses clinked, laughter echoed, and the warm aroma of roasted chicken and herbs filled the house. But as the storm outside grew heavier, an undercurrent of unease threaded through the conversations. One of the neighbors, a wiry man named Paul, joked about the power outages and said, "Let's hope nobody disappears in this weather." The comment earned a laugh, but even Paul felt a chill as his eyes flicked toward Ethan, whose expression remained unreadable. Hours passed. The storm raged on, relentless, and the power flickered for the first time. Ethan excused himself, citing a need to check on the candles he had meticulously placed around the living room. His friends continued to talk, unaware that he had disappeared into the shadows of his own home. Minutes stretched. The laughter began to falter. Then came the scream, a sharp, high-pitched cry that cut through the storm like a knife. Glass shattered somewhere in the house, followed by a thud. Silence swallowed everything. The storm raged on outside, masking any other sounds. By morning, Ethan was gone. The police were called, neighbors whispered theories, and the small community of Millstone found itself suspended between confusion and fear. Officers arrived to find the front door unlocked, the interior of the house eerily intact. On the living room floor lay a few scattered items, a tipped-over wine glass, a single shoe, and a photograph of Ethan with an unknown woman, her face scribbled out in red ink. But no signs of a struggle, no blood, no forced entry, just emptiness. Detective Clara Reynolds was the first on the scene. Sharp-eyed and methodical, she walked through the house as the storm clouds broke and sunlight began filtering in. Something about the scene felt off. "It's staged," she muttered to herself, crouching to inspect a smudge on the windowsill. But by who or what? Neighbors were questioned. Ethan's friends painted him as affable but private, a man who had lived in Millstone for years yet kept certain parts of his life hidden. "He's complicated," one woman said. "There were times I thought I really knew him, and other times it was like he wasn't even the same person I'd met." The investigation uncovered a few oddities. Ethan had left his wallet, car keys, and even his phone at home. On his desk, a small safe was hidden behind a stack of papers, its combination unknown. Detective Reynolds noted the meticulous organization of the home, the lack of forced entry, and the absence of evidence pointing to foul play. Yet the disappearance itself was undeniable. Ethan was gone. Over the next few days, the town murmured with speculation. Some believed he had fled town to start anew. Others whispered darker possibilities: robbery, murder, or an elaborate escape. The local news picked up the story, and soon the entire county was gripped by curiosity and fear. The narrative of the friendly neighbor vanished overnight, replaced by uncertainty and unease. But even as the town mourned or speculated, subtle signs hinted that Ethan's disappearance was far from ordinary. At night, a faint silhouette was seen walking near the edge of the woods behind his house. Rain or shine, someone claimed to hear movement inside the house long after the storm had passed. And in the shadows of alleyways, strangers reported catching glimpses of a man resembling Ethan, only for him to vanish before they could approach. Clara Reynolds, following her instincts, dug deeper into Ethan's past. Records surfaced of minor criminal offenses in several states, always followed by sudden disappearances. Each case bore eerie similarities to the current situation: meticulous planning, the absence of a body, and the complete befuddlement of local authorities. Ethan Cross had vanished before and survived. The plot thickened when Clara discovered an old, dusty journal tucked behind a false panel in Ethan's bookshelf. Its pages were filled with fragmented entries, cryptic phrases, and disturbing sketches of faces crossed out or obscured. One page caught her eye. Disappear completely, leave no trace, watch the world burn from the shadows. Meanwhile, the neighbors began noticing strange things. Objects moved in places they shouldn't be, lights flickered despite the circuit being off, and a feeling of being watched gnawed at them. Fear spread through Millstone like wildfire. Parents checked locks twice, windows were bolted, and strangers were eyed with suspicion. Even those who had once been Ethan's closest friends hesitated to speak of him, their memories tinged with uncertainty and fear. One night, as Clara reviewed her notes alone in the precinct, a call came in from a local man, panicked. He claimed he had seen Ethan in the woods behind his home, walking calmly in the pouring rain as if he were a ghost. When Clara arrived at the scene, she found only mud tracks that disappeared into a creek, leaving no evidence of a man having walked there at all. She shook her head. Ethan Cross was not only missing, he was becoming a legend, a phantom capable of bending reality to his will. The first part of the story closes on a chilling note. In the dead of night, a neighbor peered out their window and thought they saw Ethan standing at the edge of the woods, staring directly at the house. For a heartbeat, it seemed as if he knew they were watching. Then, in an instant, he was gone. No footprints, no sound, no sign he had ever been there. Detective Reynolds stood in the rain, notebook in hand, staring at the empty woods. Somewhere out there, she realized, Ethan Cross was alive, and the town had no idea just how dangerous he could be.
6 months had passed since Ethan Cross vanished from Millstone, leaving behind nothing but questions and unease. The town had tried to move on, but whispers of his disappearance lingered in every corner. The grocery store, the school, even the small cafes where locals gathered. Some said he was dead. Some whispered that he had planned his disappearance with a cunning only Ethan Cross could muster. None were prepared for the truth. He was alive, and he was coming back, but not as the man they thought they knew. Ethan returned quietly, slipping into the outskirts of a neighboring city under the name David Lang, a faceless identity forged with meticulous care. A fresh haircut, a new wardrobe, and a subtle limp masked the man who had disappeared. On the surface, he was unremarkable, another commuter blending into the gray monotony of city life. But beneath that calm exterior, a storm was brewing, a carefully orchestrated vendetta executed with precision. It began innocently enough. Small incidents, a house burglarized, items missing, a neighbor reporting strange noises at night. Yet these early disturbances were nothing compared to what would follow. Within weeks, a series of murders gripped the city in terror. The victims were connected, though no one could initially see the pattern. All had ties to Ethan's past, former acquaintances who had slighted him, rivals who had underestimated him, or witnesses who had glimpsed his darker side. Each death was violent, yet methodical, almost ritualistic. A single chilling signature tied the killings together. A cryptic symbol carved into a wall or left on the victim, a jagged spiral, almost like a fingerprint of menace. Detective Clara Reynolds, now reassigned to the city's homicide unit, noticed the pattern immediately. She had never forgotten Ethan Cross, not after Millstone. The case files had haunted her nights, each blank page whispering the truth she had yet to prove. Ethan had faked his death, and now, with the murders piling up, her fears were confirmed. Clara studied the first crime scene meticulously. A young man found in his apartment, bound and bloodied, a spiral carved in the wall above his head. No fingerprints, no forced entry, no sign of the killer's identity. It was as if the perpetrator had vanished into thin air. Her gut screamed the truth. Ethan Cross was back. The city was in panic. News outlets dubbed the murders the Shadow Spiral Murders, a name that only added to the terror. Panic-stricken citizens avoided going out after dark, parents clutched their children closer, and every shadow became a source of suspicion. Clara, however, refused to succumb to fear. She knew she had to anticipate Ethan's moves, think like him, and stay ahead, a nearly impossible task against a man who had already mastered the art of vanishing. Ethan, meanwhile, reveled in the chaos. Every newspaper headline, every terrified whisper was fuel for him. He moved with precision, selecting victims who had wronged him, those who had underestimated his intelligence, those who had glimpsed the dangerous edge of his mind. But the murders were not merely acts of revenge. They were messages, taunting the law, daring anyone to stop him. One night, Clara received an anonymous envelope at the precinct. Inside was a single photograph, Ethan standing in front of a city skyline, looking directly into the camera with a faint, mocking smile. Scribbled across the bottom were 3 words, "Can you catch me?" Her pulse quickened. This was no ordinary killer. This was a man orchestrating fear, carefully calculating each move to test her limits. Clara threw herself into the investigation. She studied Ethan's known behaviors, revisited his Millstone case files, and tracked patterns in his movements. Each step she took led her deeper into a psychological labyrinth. Ethan was playing a game, and he was several moves ahead. He left clues that were meant to be discovered but misinterpreted, decoys designed to distract and confuse. He wasn't just killing, he was conducting a symphony of terror, and the city was the stage. Despite her meticulous planning, Clara struggled to keep pace. Ethan anticipated every move. He vanished before SWAT teams could reach him, slipped through surveillance cameras with ease, and manipulated witnesses into giving conflicting accounts. Each time Clara thought she had cornered him, he was already gone, leaving behind only chaos and a mounting body count. The tension escalated when Clara discovered a second clue, a map of the city marked with the locations of the murders and a series of cryptic symbols she recognized from Ethan's journal in Millstone. Each location was significant, tied to someone from Ethan's past. She realized with a chill that Ethan was orchestrating the murders not only to exact revenge, but to send a message. Each victim was part of a larger story, a twisted narrative only he fully understood. As Clara delved deeper, the audience glimpsed Ethan's perspective. In his mind, he was untouchable. Months of preparation had honed his skills. Faking his death had been the easy part. Now the thrill of returning to a world that had believed him gone was intoxicating. Every victim was a chess piece, every clue a stroke of artistry. And Detective Reynolds, she was the final piece of the puzzle, a challenge he intended to savor. The tension reached a peak when Clara finally cornered Ethan at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Rain lashed against broken windows, thunder reverberated through the empty halls, and shadows danced across the walls. She moved carefully, her flashlight slicing through the darkness. For a moment, she glimpsed a figure at the far end, a silhouette unmistakably Ethan's. Before she could call out, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind only the spiral symbol etched into the floorboards. Clara's frustration boiled over. He had been there, taunting her, daring her to follow, and then vanished as if he had never existed. The realization hit her like a blow. Ethan was not just back, he was more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The city held its breath as the murders continued, each one more audacious than the last. Clara knew the final act was approaching, though she could not yet predict when or where. Ethan had returned not to hide, but to assert dominance, and he had chosen her, the detective who had once come close to uncovering him, as his ultimate adversary. Part 2 closes on a chilling note. A quiet street in the dead of night. Rain glistens on the asphalt, street lights flicker, and a lone figure watches from the shadows. Ethan Cross steps out of the darkness, his eyes gleaming with a predator's satisfaction. Somewhere far away, Clara Reynolds senses the danger closing in. The game is no longer theoretical. It is real, deadly, and far from over. Detective Clara Reynolds had never felt so hunted in her life. The city, once a familiar backdrop to her routines, now seemed like a labyrinth of shadows, alleys, and dead ends. Every streetlight flicker, every fleeting shadow sent her pulse racing. Ethan Cross was not just alive, he was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The murders had not stopped, they had grown bolder. The victims were no longer just those connected to Ethan's past, they were anyone who had even remotely interfered with his plans. Each new crime scene was more audacious than the last. A businessman found hanging in his office with the jagged spiral carved into the wall behind him. A taxi driver discovered in his car, frozen in fear, his phone displaying a taunting message, "Next time it could be you." Clara reviewed the crime scenes one by one, trying to find a pattern. Each location seemed random, yet there was a method hidden beneath the madness. She could see it in Ethan's meticulous staging, nothing left to chance, every element designed to instill terror and confusion. He was orchestrating a symphony of fear, and she was being forced to follow along with the score he wrote. One rainy evening, Clara received an anonymous tip. A small, crumpled envelope slipped under her apartment door. Inside was a single photo, Ethan's face, inches from the camera, his eyes glinting with amusement. Beneath the photo, scrawled in red ink, "Closer than you think, detective." Clara's stomach churned. She knew this wasn't a bluff. Ethan had studied her every move, predicted her thoughts, and now he was daring her to find him. The hunt escalated. Clara set up surveillance teams, monitored traffic cameras, and attempted to predict Ethan's next move. But no matter how sophisticated her tactics, he always seemed one step ahead. In the dead of night, he would vanish before anyone could reach him, leaving behind cryptic clues or empty crime scenes. It was psychological warfare. He wanted her to feel the frustration, the helplessness, the terror. Through flashbacks, the audience glimpsed Ethan's mind. He remembered every slight, every insult, every moment someone underestimated him. His fake death had been a rehearsal, a test to see who could catch him. Now he was fully in control, playing with the city as though it were a chessboard. Each murder was a move, each clue a calculated taunt. For him, the thrill wasn't just in killing, it was in proving he could outsmart everyone, especially Clara. Clara, however, was not easily broken. Each encounter with Ethan sharpened her resolve. She studied his journal from Millstone, cross-referenced the spiral symbol with historical criminal records, and retraced every known location connected to him. Slowly, patterns emerged. The murders formed a sequence, a twisted logic that only Ethan could fully comprehend. She realized that the final target would be someone from her own life, someone she trusted. The realization sent chills down her spine. Ethan's attention had shifted to her personally. Every clue, every taunt was leading towards a confrontation. Clara knew she had to act strategically. One wrong move could cost her life, or worse, the lives of others. She set up decoys, staged false crime scenes, and monitored known associates of Ethan. Yet despite her efforts, he remained elusive. One night, Clara followed a lead to an abandoned industrial district. The rain fell in sheets, puddles reflecting the dim light from broken street lamps. She moved cautiously, every sense alert, her hand resting on the grip of her service weapon. Somewhere in the shadows, she felt a presence, and her instinct screamed that Ethan was watching. Then she saw him, a figure stepping from the darkness, his coat soaked, his eyes locked on hers. Time seemed to slow. Ethan smiled, a small, chilling smile that conveyed amusement, confidence, and menace all at once. Clara raised her gun, but before she could make a move, he slipped into the shadows, disappearing as if he had never been there. All that remained was the spiral symbol etched into the concrete at the spot where he had stood. Clara's frustration boiled over, but she understood something vital. Ethan wasn't reckless, he was deliberate. Every close encounter, every escape was part of a larger plan. He wanted her to chase him, to anticipate him, to be drawn into his psychological game. And she knew that if she wanted to stop him, she had to think like him, but without losing herself in the process. As the days passed, the city's atmosphere grew tense. People walked faster, looked over their shoulders, and whispered about the ghost of the spiral. News outlets reported every murder, every cryptic symbol, fueling the panic. Ethan thrived in the chaos. He moved freely, slipping between identities, leaving minimal traces, and ensuring that each encounter with Clara escalated the tension. The climax of Part 3 approached when Clara discovered Ethan's final intended target, someone intimately connected to her past. A childhood friend who had once unknowingly interfered with Ethan's schemes was now marked for death. The realization struck Clara like lightning. The final confrontation was inevitable. She could predict the city, but she could not predict Ethan's state of mind. He was not just hunting others, he was hunting her. The suspense reached a fever pitch. Clara prepared a final trap, using everything she had learned from Ethan's patterns, behaviors, and past mistakes. She coordinated teams, surveillance, and decoys, but yet she knew that in the end, this would come down to a test of intellect, courage, and nerves. The final scene of Part 3 is cinematic. Clara standing on a rain-slicked rooftop overlooking the city, lights glinting through the storm. Her phone buzzes. A message appears from an unknown number. It reads simply, "I see you." She freezes, the weight of every life lost, every close encounter, every misstep pressing down on her. Somewhere in the city, Ethan Cross is smiling, knowing the final act of their deadly game is about to begin. The audience is left on the edge of their seats. Ethan has manipulated, terrorized, and outsmarted everyone, but now Clara is closing in. The cat-and-mouse chase will end soon, but no one can predict how. Will Clara finally outsmart Ethan, or is she walking into a trap from which there is no escape?
The rain had stopped, but the city was drenched in an eerie silence, broken only by the distant wail of sirens and the occasional drip of water from the rooftops. Detective Clara Reynolds crouched in the shadows of an abandoned warehouse at the edge of the harbor. This was it, the trap she had set for Ethan Cross. Every step had been calculated, escape routes monitored, decoys in place, and a network of surveillance ready to capture him. She had pieced together his pattern, anticipated his moves, and studied his mind in painstaking detail. She knew this confrontation would not be straightforward. Ethan did not act impulsively. He thrived on manipulation, on controlling the narrative. One misstep, one lapse in focus, and the man who had haunted 2 cities could easily turn the tables. The warehouse loomed like a hollow skeleton against the night sky, its broken windows reflecting fragments of moonlight. Clara's flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating rusted machinery, stacks of crates, and shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Her heart pounded, but her hand remained steady on the grip of her service weapon. Then she heard it, the faintest sound of movement, a whisper of leather against concrete. She froze. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Ethan Cross, drenched from the storm earlier, his eyes gleaming with that same unnerving calm. He looked almost ordinary until that gaze met hers and the air itself seemed to tighten. "Well, detective," he said, his voice low and smooth, almost conversational, "I've been expecting you." Clara's finger twitched on the trigger, but she didn't move too quickly. She needed him to reveal himself fully, to make a mistake. Ethan circled her like a predator, each step measured, taunting. The spiral symbol was etched once more into a crate behind him, a reminder of every life he had taken. "You think you can trap me?" he continued, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You've been chasing shadows for months, Clara, and now you're standing in the center of my game." The warehouse was a maze, and Ethan knew it intimately. Clara realized that any direct confrontation would be risky. She had to outthink him. She kept moving, carefully, letting him follow her line of sight without giving away her position entirely. Every instinct screamed that this was a psychological battlefield as much as a physical one. Ethan lunged suddenly, fast and precise. Clara barely rolled aside, firing a warning shot that ricocheted off the steel beams. He darted behind a stack of crates, disappearing from view. Her heart hammered, not from fear, but from the knowledge that every second counted. Ethan thrived on pressure. He wanted her to panic, to make the wrong move. Through the warehouse's shattered skylight, moonlight illuminated a message painted on the floor. "Catch me if you can." Clara's mind raced. It was a trap. He wanted her to follow the message, to enter a zone where he had the advantage. But she couldn't afford hesitation. She had to predict his moves, anticipate his psychology, and turn the hunter into the hunted. Suddenly, a shadow moved above her. Ethan had climbed a catwalk, using the warehouse's structure to stay out of reach. He dropped silently behind a crate on the far side. Clara aimed carefully, her voice firm. "Ethan, it ends tonight. You can't escape justice forever." He chuckled softly, a sound that made her skin crawl. "Justice? You speak as though the world is fair. I simply do what needs to be done. You and I, we're not so different, you and I." The words were designed to unsettle her, to plant doubt. Clara's mind raced. She couldn't allow herself to react emotionally. Ethan wanted that. She noticed a series of crates stacked haphazardly, forming a narrow path that led toward the center of the warehouse. It was likely a trap, but it was also the only way to force him out of his elevated position. She took a deep breath and moved carefully. Each step echoed in the cavernous space, every sound amplified. From above, Ethan's silhouette shifted, blocking the light. Then he spoke, almost whispering, "Come closer. Let's finish this." Clara froze for just a moment, enough for him to step forward. Then, as he lunged, she executed the move she had planned, a feint to the left, followed by a sweep to force him off balance. Ethan stumbled but quickly recovered, turning with deadly speed. Their eyes locked. For the first time, she saw a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze, but it was fleeting. The confrontation turned physical. Clara and Ethan moved through the crates, ducking, dodging, and striking. His strength was surprising, but Clara had anticipated it. Using leverage, timing, and the environment, she forced him toward a narrow catwalk. Every move was high stakes. One misstep could send either of them plummeting into the warehouse's darkness. Ethan's mask of control cracked slightly. He realized that Clara wasn't just chasing shadows. She was predicting him, reading him, and turning his game against him. In a desperate attempt, he lunged for her weapon, and they struggled, the spiral symbol beneath them, a silent witness to the chaos.
Finally, Clara saw the opening. With a precise kick, she sent Ethan off balance and he fell onto a padded platform below, enough to incapacitate him without killing him. She raised her gun, steady, as backup arrived moments later, surrounding him. He laughed softly, almost impressed. "Well done, detective, but remember, you only win because I let you." Ethan was finally restrained, cuffed, and led away. Clara felt a mixture of relief and lingering unease. The city had survived another night, but the scars of his return would not heal easily. She knew this wasn't just about catching a murderer. It was about understanding a mind that was almost impossibly clever, a man who could vanish and return at will, leaving terror in his wake. As Ethan was escorted into a police van, he turned his head and locked eyes with Clara one last time. "You think this is the end?" he said softly. "I'm always a step ahead, Clara. Watch the shadows. Always." The van drove off into the night, leaving Clara standing alone in the rain-soaked warehouse. She exhaled, the weight of the case pressing down on her shoulders. She had caught him, for now, but Ethan Cross had proven that even the cleverest traps, the most meticulous plans, could not fully contain a mind like his. In the distance, the city slept uneasily. Streetlights flickered and shadows seemed longer than they should have been. Somewhere in the dark corners of the urban landscape, the faintest echo of a laugh carried through the night. It was a reminder that Ethan Cross was a man who thrived in the unseen, the unknown, and the terrifying possibility that he might one day return. For Clara, there was closure, but not peace. She knew that some predators left marks on the world that could never truly be erased. Ethan Cross had vanished once, returned, and wreaked havoc, and while justice had prevailed tonight, the memory of his brilliance, cruelty, and audacity would haunt her and the city for years to come. The screen fades to black, leaving the audience with one lingering thought. In the shadows of every city, the unseen predator waits, watching, always ready to return.